Good evening and welcome to Solutionary TV. I am your host, Dr. Tatiana, and I'm really enthusiastic to be playing on a topic tonight that is my own personal passion. I call it my jam or my crack, because when we are focused on solutions, we have to start with the solutions that ring true for us. And as one that is a Gaia spirit, true and true, a Virgo, one of the earth, I cannot tell you enough how much I am passionate about gardening, about sustainable and regenerative systems, about clean energy, and about really using the earth in a relationship of symbiosis that is our natural birthright and what our ancestors and indigenous peoples have always known and never forgotten. So tonight we have a very special guest, and I'm excited to introduce him. His name is Greg Peterson, and he is with the Urban Farm. Let me tell you a bit about him, because he's got a wealth of knowledge to share with us about what can be done in very small spaces. Greg Peterson is a green living and sustainability innovator, having appeared extensively on television and radio, and is a frequent guest columnist for publications. His mission is to inspire people to embrace their own greenness, which he does daily by living what he speaks. His master's degree is in urban and environmental planning and is augmented by 34 years of real-world self-study, ownership of multiple businesses, and a rich background in entrepreneurship, computer training, software development, and management. As a resident of Phoenix for the last 48 years, Greg is well-versed in urban sustainability and food production, permaculture, and innovated the Urban Farm. On his 1/3 acre property, he has featured the tenants of that urban farm, featuring an entirely edible landscape. Yes, entirely edible. We'll hear more about that in a minute. Including over 75, can you believe this, 75 fruit trees, rainwater and gray water harvesting. We'll talk more about gray water. 3 solar applications, and the extensive use of reclaimed and recycled building materials. There's so much more I could have spoken about, Greg, but I'm going to let him do that. Welcome, Greg. Such a thrill to have you here tonight.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I love doing these.
Well, this is what you do. I mean, basically, you had your own passion, you personalized it, you made it your own. You proved the principle, which we all know we learn best when we actually apply our knowledge and our wisdom, and nothing beats the school of hard knocks. And then the gift that you give in creating the Urban Farm, and I found you because I follow those that are speaking big things and ideas into the world of regenerative systems, sustainability, and permaculture. I follow your podcast and a lot of the great recordings and the experts that you have there. Our viewers, they need to know more about what you're doing, because so many of us think, I only have this postage stamp of a lot, or I've got really restrictive covenants. So if we can just get our viewers excited about what you've been able to do, starting with what you actually practiced in a tried and true way as an application before giving the gift of having so many other experts working with you, tell them how you did it. Tell them how you actually got a conceptual vision around what you've been able to do with your 3rd acre.
Well, so I actually started in 1975. This whole thing started for me when I was 15, and I wrote a paper on how we were overfishing the oceans. And it struck me then that there was something deeply wrong with the way we were living on the planet. And for me, it started with food. Fast forward to 1991, I had multiple things happen for me in 1991 that were pivotal. I did this seminar. It was a 2-weekend seminar called the Advanced Course at Landmark Education, and I had to define for myself who I was in the world. And I created myself in that moment. I created myself to be the person on the planet responsible for transforming our global food system.
Wow.
I, I have no idea where that came from any more than
No small beans on that, was that, Greg?
well, who knows where I'll get with it, but it'll be what it is, and but that's it. It drives me forward every day.
Mm-hmm.
So then I discovered also in 1991 a book called Ishmael by Daniel Quinn.
Mm-hmm.
And I live by Quinian philosophy now. He has, I don't know, 14, 15 books out talking about how we came to dominate the planet and the faults with that.
Yeah.
So those two things happened in 1991. I had two more things happen in 1991. And the third one was I discovered permaculture. And I like
Mm-hmm.
to call permaculture the art and science of working with nature. Because
Yeah.
as my late friend Toby Hemingway said, nature always bats last. I'm going to say that again. Nature always bats last.
Yeah.
So we, as human beings, need to figure out how to work in conjunction with nature. And we human beings, we spend our lives fighting nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to shift that. We have to start working in the flow,
Yes.
rather than against the flow.
Exactly. That seems so simple when you say it. It sounds utterly common sense. And we don't
Yeah,
think about
exactly.
the fact that in permaculture speak, which you and I do, I'm a certified permaculturist, and I have tried to apply that on the property that I have, 2 gorgeous acres. How much can I permaculture and
Right?
work with nature here? The idea is to respect that nature is in a state of progression. She is
Mhm.
always in a state of progression.
Yep.
She doesn't like to be unclothed and have her soil tilled to excess to the point that
Mm.
the brown earth and the microbes are exposed. She likes to
Right.
immediately pick up on whatever she can to blanket herself. And so when you think about the simple things about a good day to plant and sow, paying attention to weather patterns, paying attention to water flows, all of this is just
All that.
respecting that nature has intelligence and that maybe we should work with that intelligence rather than treating it like an object that we've over commodified in our mind, perhaps.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it, over commodified.
So let's talk
So
about your third acre. Give us more of this juicy story.
hold on. There's one more piece here. Piece number 4 from 1991. This one hit me upside the head like a Mack truck. A friend of mine was in the South Pacific on a sailboat, and they stopped at an island and were looking for a grocery store. And the people on the island kind of looked at them funny and laughed, and they said, "Go pick your own." Right?
Right,
Right?
right.
Exactly. It's like, oh my God, really?
Mm-hmm.
So we can grow our own food. So fast forward to 2001. Once again, I'm in school. I'm a lifelong learner. I never stop learning. And I was getting my bachelor's degree from 99 to '04, and then my master's in '04 to '06. And in 2001, I had to write a paper, a new vision. I had to revisualize my life. And what I realized in writing that paper and what came out was the vision for the urban farm. And the urban farm is a third of an acre.
Mm-hmm.
That's 80 feet wide. It's 160 feet deep.
Mm-hmm.
There's, as you said, 70 different varieties or 70 different fruit trees on the property. And basically what I've done is I've turned it into what I like to call an environmental showcase home.
Wow.
And when I do tours, I tell people, I can talk about what's going on here for days because I've been here 28 and a half years now. I've been studying permaculture on the property for 26 and a half of those years,
Mm-hmm.
and implementing permaculture processes. So really what that means for those listeners that kind of can't grok it, what we're doing is we're looking at natural systems, and I'm plugging in natural systems into my landscape. I'm building food forests. I've got chickens in the backyard. And in permaculture, we talk about something called stacking functions. And stacking functions means we take one asset, in this case, let's talk about a chicken, and we have them do multiple things for us in the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
So what do chickens do? They eat. So they're eating bugs and weeds. They're pooping. So they're giving us fertilizer. They're giving us eggs every day.
Mm-hmm.
They're tilling. Basically they're workers in my backyard. And one of the things they do really well in the backyard is they mow my grass for me. So I have grass in the backyard, and they handle that. So I absolutely dislike mowing. I think it's kind of ludicrous. So I let the chickens do it, and they're having fun doing it, and they're workers in my backyard. So what we've done is we've taken this one asset called a chicken. By the way, we have 19 of them here, and we use them as our workers in the backyard for multiple different things. So that's
Hmm.
that's a function of permaculture that we call stacking functions.
That is a beautiful example in permaculture and the laws of reciprocity, is it not?
Mm. Oh yes, absolutely.
They're winning big,
Absolutely.
getting all of that clean,
Right.
natural
Yep.
grass, bugs, unsprayed, untainted yard to run amok upon, and
Yeah.
actually be giving back to you at the
Right.
same time that it's a wonderful life. So how let's
Yeah.
talk about your third acres and not only the systems you've implemented, but how you worked respectfully and cooperatively with your neighbors in a
Hmm.
subdivision and
Hmm.
potentially with some restrictiveness around covenants and HOAs, because this is really the big sticking point for a lot of those that say, I can't do it. And I
Right.
know that you've got some tremendous wisdom for them.
Yeah. So given I have two planning degrees, urban planning is city planning essentially. I learned a good almost 20 years ago that we have to make it pleasurable to look at.
Hmm.
So my entire front yard is edible, and I have 42 fruit trees in the front yard. So you have to make
Wow.
it nice to look at and something that the neighbors can buy into. So my neighbor across the street came to me a while back, and we were talking, and I check in with neighbors periodically just to make sure everything's kosher.
Hmm.
And I said to her, how do you like living across from the urban farm? She's lived over there, probably 6 or 7 years, and her face lit up. And she said, recently, one of my friends told me about this really cool place in Phoenix called the Urban Farm. And then she kind of did this and she lit up and she said, yeah, they're my neighbors.
Wow. Pride of
So,
association.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, making it something that the neighbors can buy into,
Hmm.
and most most municipalities, they're managed on a complaint basis. So if nobody complains,
Hmm.
if you keep your neighbors happy, you're miles ahead. So that's really the big thing. And then for those of you in HOAs, I'm not in an HOA. For those of you that are in HOAs, the biggest thing is to get on the board and get the rules changed. Change people's mind.
Hmm.
When they can start understanding that their food, they can grow healthy, nutrient dense, incredibly tasting food in their yard, you'll start getting them on board.
Hmm. So there's so many avenues that we could take and in going forward about not only getting rules changed and dealing with neighbor complaints, but one of the things that you said post or pre-air that I think would be tremendous for our viewers to know is that if you were just to drive by, you would not immediately notice a
Right.
significant difference architecturally in your yard to other people's yards. So it's not an
Correct.
eyesore. It's pleasant to look
Mm-mm.
at. Can you talk a
Yep.
little bit to that as well? I mean, obviously it has a lot to do with your degrees. So we know that, we're just going to hit the surface, but we don't have pictures right now to be able to throw up. We'd love to catch the last of that winter sun coming down there in
Uh-huh.
Phoenix. I would love to draw a picture for them verbally of what they would be looking at if they were to drive by.
Perfect. So my front yard, like I said, there's 40 something fruit trees in the front yard, and the center of the front yard is open. So if you were to drive by, unless you knew what you were looking for,
Hmm.
it would look like every other house on the street. And what I've done is I've put a citrus hedge. I've got 14 citrus trees, well, they're citrus bushes that run right next to the street. So people driving by are going to see, right now, they're going to see navel oranges, all
Right.
kinds of them,
Hmm.
which, the neighbors know that they can pick a few of them. They're not baseballs for the kids. And so there's a sharing piece that's going on here as well. And
Lovely.
one of the things that I've noticed decades ago was the amazing abundance that is in nature. When we start growing things, they produce so much. So I've started saying over the past couple, 3 years that there's only one place on the planet that lack lives. You want to think about where that might be?
Well, we've got everybody scratching their noggins. You go ahead and there you go. Right.
Scratching your noggins. This is the
Perspective.
only place that lack lives.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at my landscape, it is so incredibly highly productive. I will probably harvest 1,000 pounds of oranges off of my third of an acre this year, and a lot of them are in the front yard in the place where the neighbors have access to them.
Mm-hmm.
So then if you walk up the driveway, on the left, I've got a peach tree, a loquat, uh, and 8 apple trees. And I,
Wow.
I put a lot of hedges up. I like hedges, so hedges are better than fences as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the right is the open front yard. And the open front yard has grass in the middle. And around the periphery, I've put in garden beds. So in the front yard, I probably have 4,000 square feet of garden beds that we regularly grow groceries in. So right now, we're in the winter here, and the good news is in the desert we can grow all through the winter.
Yes.
And so we're harvesting broccoli and Swiss chard and kale and carrots and beets and fennel. There's fennel out there, nasturtium. So there's just this plethora of stuff that what I've designed in the place is that a lot of these things go to seed and they replant themselves
Yes.
and they come back year after year so that there's nothing for me to do except harvest food when it comes up.
Right.
And
Right.
that's you used the word a couple of times, regenerative. And when I say regenerative, that's the kind of thing I'm talking to. I'm talking to a process that you put in place that it's like a snowball. You put it in place and it starts rolling and it continues to roll.
Mm-hmm.
So every year I have parsley, oregano, basil, mint, nasturtiums, lettuce, cowpeas, which are like a really nice bean. Um, oh, I know. There's at least another dozen things that just plant themselves year
Yeah.
after year after year so that all there is for me to do is to harvest out of this awesome food forest. So that's what the front yard looks like.
So you've got this amazing reciprocity in the backyard with the chickens.
Hmm.
You've got this amazing sense of volunteerism going on in the front yard with the reseeding, right?
Yes.
And obviously good soil because
Oh,
they're
yes.
they're 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 shedding and they're adding to your topsoil. They're nitrogen fixing and oxygenating that soil.
Yep.
Um, let's talk a little bit about how you decide what you want to plant, because we know that for those our viewers that are excited about biodynamic concepts, permaculture, working with some of these regenerative systems, we
Hmm.
don't necessarily go and pick up the seeds that are, sitting at the edge of the little carousel at the Home Depot or at the,
Hmm.
regular hardware store. Sometimes we're a little bit picky. We want the
Hmm.
heirloom. We're looking for organic seeds. We're
Hmm.
looking for things that are harder to
Hmm.
come by. How did you choose what was going to serve your homestead the best?
Well, so the big piece is I plant what I love. So I don't grow things that I don't love unless I'm growing for somebody like mom. So I'll grow eggplant for mom because she loves them, but I'm not a fan of eggplant, so I don't grow them. So piece number one for me is what do I love? And then I only grow that.
Mm-hmm.
Then then I look to nature. Piece number two is what grows when.
Mm-hmm.
And I plant with the seasons here. It's really important to just let nature be. So it'll get down close to freezing here in the next 2 to 3 weeks here at the urban farm,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't cover anything
Wow.
because I only plant things that um, that are going to thrive in the environment that I have them in.
So they're
So we
hardy
grow
to your zone. You make sure that you're
exactly.
really selective about what's appropriate for the zone.
Yeah, exactly. And so I plant summer things in the summer and winter things in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
So the time to plant tomatoes here is in January, and we basically grow tomatoes from January into June, and then they just they toast in the heat. So I don't try to grow things outside of our season. That's a really important piece. So what do you love? And then follow what nature would do.
Mm-hmm. And that seems so very simple, Greg. And I know that it's kind of a thing that's been lost since the baby
Uh,
boomer, World War II generations. Remember Liberty Gardens? You remember
oh,
that
yes,
we
yes,
were,
yes.
we were told and encouraged by our government and by the agencies that motivated us to take a lot of pride during
Hmm.
times where we were brought together and were collaborative, certainly around World War II. Let's grow our own food. Let's create an ease on the system.
Yep.
Most of us don't even pay attention to the labels to take a look at the mango or the pineapple.
Where it came
How
from.
far
Yeah.
did this come? How much petroleum was used to get it here? How many?
Hmm.
What is the true cost? We had a fabulous guest that was on several months ago, Zoe Weil with the Institute for Humane Education, and she's all about teaching her students what the true cost of any given item or commodity is, which is not
Mm-hmm.
something we're trained to think about, critical thinking
Right.
skills. So when you look at what you're growing there and you're planning it according to the hardiness of the zone and maybe some that have also been acclimated, particularly to,
Right.
some of the weather patterns that do really well in Phoenix, talk to our viewers a bit about how you've learned through the School of Hard Knocks, in addition to your master's degree, what
Hmm.
really makes your property permanently successful and verdant.
Oh, well, that's a good question. Um, Planting open pollinated seeds,
Okay.
that's a piece of the permanence. Uh, And that's a piece of the regenerative process as well.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they plant themselves year after year.
Right.
Another thing is, like I said, 70 fruit trees. I run a fruit tree program, education program here in the Phoenix metropolitan area, and we delivered over 5,200 fruit trees to people in the program last year. So it's an education program. They learn how to grow fruit trees successfully, and then they can purchase trees from us. And another successful piece is that is the fruit trees. I love fruit trees because you plant them once
Mm-hmm.
and they make fruit for decades.
Right. They're
So
prolific.
they're absolutely prolific.
Forgive my
Absolutely.
chuckle. I was not meaning to be disrespectful or out of tune, but when you said that you teach them how to grow the fruit trees and then they get their fruit tree, I thought, well, that's so very common sense. Let's prove they're not going to kill that fruit tree first.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
let's teach them how to
Exactly.
take home their little fruit baby so that fruit baby
Hmm.
thrives. Because how many people bring pretty things home from the nursery or from the Home Depot, the Lowe's, whatever, and it
Right.
dies within that 60 to 120 days or longer, and it just ends up coming back and they replace it, maybe free, maybe refunded, maybe not. But knowing how to care for things is not always
Right.
an intuitive relationship, is it, Greg?
Right. Exactly. And you really have to learn how to do it. And I've done something that I would say is revolutionary this year in my fruit tree program, and that is that I'm guaranteeing my trees.
Hmm.
So when the people come and pick up the trees from me, they come with a guarantee. Here's the piece though. They have to learn how to take care of that tree. And as part of the guarantee, they take responsibility for making sure that they learn how to take care of that tree.
Right.
And that's really the rub. So it's no fun for me for somebody to buy a fruit tree from me and take it home and have it die.
Right.
It's not serving my purpose, which is to create a regenerative food system here in the Valley of the Sun between now and when I die.
Well,
So what,
good
go ahead.
stewardship, right, Greg?
Exactly. Good stewardship. And so what I've done is I've taken I've taken the idea of being successful growing a fruit tree and teach them. So I do online classes, I do in-person classes, I do on-the-phone consultations, and then I put the responsibility on them to make sure that they know how to learn how to do it
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that they do it. And then if there's a problem, they just have to email me with pictures and we'll kind of diagnose the problem before it's ever a problem. So this really goes for me, this really goes to the success of how to get people happily, prosperously growing food. And we absolutely have to teach them how, because we've lost that as a culture.
Yes.
Our grandparents knew how to do it. My mom didn't really know how to do it. I learned starting when I was 14. I know that my niece and nephews don't have a clue where their food comes from, number one, or how to grow it.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, if food stopped coming into the valley, actually, here's an interesting statistic. Most urban areas have a 3-day supply of food.
I've
That's
heard
it.
that statistic. Yes.
Yeah, that's it. And once it's gone, and actually, I say that, if there's a whisper of a shortage, there's only going to be about 3 hours on the grocery store
Mm-hmm.
shelves.
Mm-hmm.
So we absolutely have to figure out how to grow our own food again.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm really inspired by are the amount of young people, 20 somethings and 30 somethings that have taken on being a farmer and growing their own food. And that's one of the things that I teach here in the Valley. To become an urban farmer, it's really simple. Let's see here. Urban Farm, that's Urban Farm U, this is Urban Farm Fruit Tree Program. And to become an urban farmer, it's really simple. Grow food, share it with somebody. You don't have to sell it. You can share it with your family and name your farm.
Wow.
And by doing those three things, you're creating a powerful conversation in the world
Mm-hmm.
about where your food comes from, even if you're growing just a little bit. And here's the thing, my friend Melanie lives in an apartment. Her, her farm name is Two Fat Cats Apartment Garden. And she grows on her porch.
Mm-hmm.
She
Yep.
grows on her porch. You can grow. Here's what I tell people all the time: grow herbs. They are the most expensive thing to buy and the simplest thing to grow.
Yeah.
Herbs are just blindingly simple to
Mm-hmm.
grow. You just have to pay attention to them.
Yeah. Yeah, and understand what they're benefiting. I mean, obviously, if we're trying to grow anything on your porch or in your yard, you need the pollinators, and a lot of them flower. They
Hmm.
can immediately go on to any salad, any dish that you're going to make. They have a tendency to
Right.
smell good. I mean, there's just so many multiplicitous benefits for
Yeah.
growing some pots, even on a porch, if that's the most that you can dedicate your time to do. But,
Right.
I don't even want to deviate too much onto that conversation because I really want our viewers tonight to get the biggest bang for their buck about with a third acre. They
Hmm.
know now that they can grow 75 trees and have it be tasteful, have it be reciprocal, and that your neighbors know with, a respectful boundary. Please don't turn it into a baseball field. But yes, please come and enjoy my
Right.
surplus. Let's talk about the water capture. Let's talk about some of the extra uses of the chickens,
Mm,
and let's talk about good soil because I know you've got the
yeah.
juice for us tonight on having quality soil because it doesn't matter how good your seeds are. Does it, Greg? If you really have
Nope.
poor soil or,
Yep.
or, or soil that's being leached away because you don't have, your downspout set right and you're not capturing water. So let's talk a
Right.
little bit about some of the permaculture aspects of your third acre.
Absolutely. So rainwater harvesting. Let's go there first. And for the longest time, I learned about rainwater harvesting and really gray water harvesting for the first time in 1991 in my permaculture design course. And it took me at least a decade to grok to get really what it means.
Yeah.
And for me, the rainwater harvesting piece isn't about storage, it's about rainwater directing. Where are you putting that water? So I do rainwater harvesting here. I do gray water harvesting. Gray water harvesting is any water that goes down any of your drains in your house besides your toilet and your kitchen sink. It is legal in the state of Arizona to use it in your
Mm-hmm.
landscape. And so what I've done is I've put systems in place both inside and outside. So outside I have an outdoor shower and an outdoor kitchen or an outdoor vegetable washing sink that drain out into the landscape. And I take that water and I put it exactly where I need it.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you the story of two rainwater harvesting systems here at the urban farm. First of all, water here in Phoenix, it's kind of counterintuitive, but it is super cheap for water here.
Hmm.
And so I have a $1,500 rainwater harvesting tank that I installed in 2014. And probably it's going to be another 20 years before I get my money out of it. The return on investment was because water is so inexpensive, I'm not going to make that return on investment. And in 2006, it took me a couple of years to kind of get that. For me, rainwater harvesting and gray water harvesting isn't about putting them in tanks and holding it for later. It's about designing my landscape.
Yeah.
This is how nature would do it. Nature would design the landscape and put the water when you have it where you need it.
Mm-hmm.
So in my rainwater downspouts near them and my gray water effluent where it goes, I planted trees around those areas.
Ah, yes.
So
Okay.
yeah, so that when the water arrives, the water's going to where it needs to go
Mm-hmm.
without me even having to think about it. This is one of the regenerative pieces that I encourage people to do. What kind of system can you put in place on your property that you can put in place and you don't ever have to think about it again?
Mm-hmm.
And I have one of those in a rainwater harvesting situation, and it harvests tens of thousands of gallons a year and puts that water about 30 feet away from my house in an orchard that I planted. So it's feeding some of my, it's feeding some of my fruit trees out in the yard. So that's rainwater and gray water harvesting.
Okay. Now, how about keeping that soil if you've got that runoff going on or that very, designed
Hmm.
water reallocation? What are we doing to keep all that soil happy? I know you've got some of the magic on keeping soil at an optimal
Yeah,
chemical balance, but again, doing that naturally, understanding that we don't need to fight nature and we don't need a whole bunch
right.
of NPK bags, right? So what are we
Hmm.
doing there?
So first of all, let me just be clear that the rainwater and gray water harvesting exits under the ground. So it's not washing anything away.
Okay.
That's a really important piece. The water doesn't come off of my roof and create gullies. It comes off of my roof into a pipe and then exits under the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So that's number one. Number two, and you've mentioned it several times, healthy soil. Healthy soil is the single biggest thing you can do as a gardener, as an urban farmer, as a food grower. Grow healthy food. And generally, there are 5 components of healthy soil. You likely have one of them. It's called dirt. Dirt's got all kinds of minerals built up in it. But if that's all you have, like we do here in the desert, if that's all you have, you're not going to be successful growing food.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to add the other 4 components. And there's a really super simple fix. But the other 4 components are, so you have dirt,
Mm-hmm.
airspace, water, organic matter, and everything that's alive in the soil. And the cool thing is that if you add organic matter to your garden,
Mm-hmm.
the life's going to show up. The roots are going to do the work of adding the airspace into your soil and letting the water go in. In fact, one of the things that I tell people often is that, I kind of love the weeds that show up in my yard. First of all, weeds are pioneer species. Often they're nitrogen fixers.
Mm-hmm.
They're they're great diggers. They're going to dig up and create healthy soil for you. So what I'll do with say lamb's quarters. Lamb's quarters is one of the greens that we eat here at the urban farm that's a weed. And I'll let it grow to 2 feet tall. I'll harvest the top, which by the way, again, it's a pioneer species, so it's digging out the nutrients out of the soil. I'll harvest the top. I'll cut off that plant half-inch below the soil. I'll leave the roots in the soil to rot,
Mm-hmm.
putting compost, organic matter right in the soil,
Mm-hmm.
and and then having pathways for water to get in, and that's really having nature do the soil building for me. And then all I do every year is I add 2 to 4 inches of fresh compost on top.
Okay, so you're bringing
Super
that
simple.
in from where? If you're not growing it there on your property or creating your own compost, do you have
Hmm.
some reciprocity with, an affiliate in within the urban farm, or tell our viewers how you're making that happen?
So I have it's curious that you would ask this because I didn't actually uh, tell you anything about this, but I have a regenerative composting system set up here at the urban farm. And this is something that I've discovered how to make it work pretty much in the past year or so. So let me define regenerative for you. Actually, let me step back from that. Every single human system that we've put in place on the planet is degenerative. Our roads, our pipelines, our bridges, our chairs, this chair I'm sitting in, the house around me, they're all degenerative. We
Mm-hmm.
have to continue to put energy, money, and time into them in order for them to continue to thrive going into the future.
Yes.
Even our medical systems and our financial systems, they're all degenerative in nature.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to play in the realm of regenerative. Regenerative is this, and nature is regenerative. And basically, what it means is that it circles around. So, one of the regenerative systems that I have in place, and I do this in Ignasium, this circle thing, because it really gets people to think. At the urban farm, I have all the plants that I planted out 10 years ago, the parsley and the oregano and the basil and all that, and the nasturtiums, all that stuff I talked about earlier. Every year, those things go to seed and they become more acclimatized to the property.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a system that's in place that I don't even have to think about. It just happens. So, composting here on the urban farm. I have four unique systems, well, three unique systems and a standard system set up here at the urban farm on composting. First of all, I have three neighbors that come and put compost in a bucket at the end of my driveway. It says compost on the side of the bucket. And, I'll get a text from one of my neighbors and they say, "Hey, Greg, I just put compost in your bucket." And then we have the compost that we make from because we eat at home every night. And often it's from things that we harvest from the yard. If not, we're harvesting them from a Trader Joe's or a Whole Food or the local farmer's market.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have all those scraps. Plus, I have a restaurant that I harvest 10 5-gallon buckets a week of food scraps from.
Wow.
So I have this amazing amount of food scraps that arrive here at the urban farm.
Mm-hmm.
And they go to one of four places. They go to my worm bin. And with worm bins, I have composting worms. I have a nice size composting worm bin set up, and those a lot of those food scraps go to the worm bins, and the worms make worm poop or worm castings, which
Right.
for those gardeners out there, that is basically gardener's gold.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably make 10 pounds of worm castings a month.
Mm-hmm.
Which that's a
That's
respectable
impressive.
amount. That's a respectable amount. So that's place number one. Place number two that the scraps go to is the chickens. So the chickens will eat a lot of it, and the chickens poop, right? And that poop goes into the compost bin and to the basins around my fruit trees, fertilizing my fruit trees. And in the compost bin to make compost, that's place number 4 is actually the compost bin. So I do traditional composting, and I get, compost from that. And then the third place, I know I skipped over 3 to get to 4, but so the fourth place is compost. The third place is my soldier fly bin. Have you ever heard of soldier flies?
I have actually. I'm working with some gentlemen that are out with Louisville permaculture here, actually just a little bit further inland near Winston-Salem. And I saw the starts of that fly bin and found it a little repulsive and equally fascinating. So
Yes,
why don't you tell our viewers why this is important and how this is giving you an edge?
Yeah, so it can be quite repulsive because basically you put food scraps in a bin for them to rot. And the soldier flies lay their eggs in the soldier fly bin. And there's 3 stages to the soldier fly. That's the cool part. The larval stage, and the larval stage will eat like twice as much of twice their body weight every day in food scraps. And they grow at a voracious rate. In like 21 days, they go from a microscopic larva to this grub that's about like that. So 3/4 of an inch long. And when they're done eating and they transition into the larval stage, they climb up and out of the muck because the soldier fly bin can get pretty mucky. That's the part that, will turn your stomach. You just got to take a deep breath.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've found is that once they got set up and running, it doesn't smell so bad.
Mm-hmm.
So these grubs are 45% protein, they're high in calcium, they're high in magnesium. They are a perfect food source for fish, if you're growing fish on your farm, or
Hmm.
for chickens.
Okay. So if
So
you're
that,
doing the aquaponics or you've got the chickens in the
mhm,
backyard, you're keeping both of those critters
yep,
happy. Okay.
exactly, exactly. And if I get a bucket of soldier fly grubs and even walk within 20 feet of the chickens, they go nuts. They know they're coming. So all of these things, the worm bin, the chickens and the chicken poop, the compost bin, and the soldier fly bin, they all feed my composting system here at the urban farm in one way or another that eventually feeds the soil, that eventually feeds the healthy plants, that eventually lets me harvest more food
Hmm.
and start the process over again. So when I say regenerative, that's what I mean. We got this kind of a circle going on. Just like with the herbs, all the herbs and plants that I grow here every year, just like they would in nature, I've got composting going on in a major way here at the urban farm,
Yeah.
and it doesn't ever smell.
See,
It
I
does.
appreciate that. That's really what you keep bringing our viewers back to understand.
Hmm.
You can implement this many systems
Yep.
with the end goal being high quality, nutrient dense soil. And you can find room for it and have it even tastefully arranged or,
Yep.
situated on a third acre and have it be consistently regenerative and self supporting. That
And
that almost seems incomprehensible to
yeah.
anyone that can't see it, which is why towards the end of the segment we're going to give everyone the addresses and the emails and your podcast because I want them to see what you've been able to accomplish. Sometimes you kind of need to put a
Perfect.
vision with
Yep.
the descriptor terms, right, Greg?
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
all of these things have been feasible and implementable on a third acre.
Right. Exactly. And so I've been here 28 and a half years at the urban farm, and that's actually not quite the truth. I spent exactly 1 year here, not here, about 4 years ago.
Okay.
I got to a place after living here for 24 years. It was like, okay, I need a break. So I leased the urban farm to a friend of mine
Hmm.
and I sold most of my stuff and I moved out. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't, it was just, it was time for a change in my life. And I rented a place with a 200 square foot back porch. And on that 200 square foot back porch, I had 3 growing boxes that were 2 foot by 3 foot each.
Hmm.
And I had a tower garden from Juice
Yeah.
Plus. Juice Plus, the Juice Plus Tower Garden is an absolutely flipping amazing piece of technology.
Agreed.
If you want to get jump started and get your garden growing right now, there's a little bit of a cost to get going up front, but get a Juice Plus Tower Garden. They are
Hmm.
absolutely amazing. And in that 200 square feet, I grew enough food that I could eat out of that. And it was probably only 80 or 100 square feet total that I was growing food in. I grew enough food to eat out of the garden every day.
Amazing.
So you don't
Yeah.
have to have a third of an acre. It's just that's what I happen to have.
It really is kind of rethinking the
Hmm.
spaces that we live in and recognizing how much wasted space exists in a stucco wall or in
Right.
a concrete slab. Isn't it, Greg?
Right.
It's really
Yeah.
reimagining how to use
Exactly.
it in a way that's much more effective and is going to be part of your ongoing life skills as you
Right.
develop them to create this type of a lifestyle.
And here's what I tell people. There's a really, really important piece to this lifestyle. And I happen to call it the urban lifestyle. You can urban farming lifestyle. You can call it a living green lifestyle, which I've lived for decades. And that is you have to start out simple. So let me tell you a story real quick. About 3 months ago, a friend of mine called me. I've known Liz for a couple of decades, and she has a large house in North Scottsdale. And she called me and she said, my husband and I are thinking about putting in a 2,000 square foot greenhouse in our backyard. And I said, have you ever grown anything before? And she said, no. So I said, what's your address? So I pulled up her on Google Maps, I pulled up her address.
Right.
And in about 30 seconds, I realized that she had the perfect place for a pot pot, put things in pots garden
Uh-huh.
as a place to start. So through the conversation, first of all, if you put on a 2,000 square foot greenhouse, you're going to spend 10 grand for a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a 20 to 30 hour a week job. And so that was my first question to her. And that was, do you have that?
Yes.
So, and then my second question is, have you ever grown anything? Well, no, I've not ever grown anything. So we started looking in this eastern facing patio that she has. It gets perfect morning sun. Best place to grow herbs and vegetables is in a morning sun, especially in the desert
Mm-hmm.
where we're at. So in the scope of about a 20-minute conversation, she realized that she had a half a dozen garden pots that she didn't have anything in. I told her to get some really good, healthy potting soil,
Mm-hmm.
and she was off to the races. So the lesson here is you start small, you
Mm-hmm.
take on one little piece at a time, you go be successful with that one little piece, and then you do another piece. Because a lot of times what happens is people come to the urban farm and there is so much going on, a third of an acre, solar panels and fruit trees and rainwater and gray water harvesting and edible gardens everywhere. It's like, oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
where do I even start?
Mm-hmm.
You start with one thing, make it something fun that your family can get into, and be successful with it. Because if we do something and it's too much and we're not successful, what happens?
We quit. Human
We quit.
nature.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right. We need to be successful with this. So make sure that you pick something that you can go be successful with, be successful, and then add number two, and then add number three, and add number four. That is one of my biggest pieces of advice for you is, besides grow healthy soil, is pick a project that excites you and excites your family and that's simple to get going.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Greg. And I want to kind of circle back on why is this even important? Most of our viewers that follow the type of shows that we do about
Hmm.
solutions-based innovations and visionary concepts in changing the systems that we all know we can look around and see simply aren't working. Those that
Yeah.
it's not obvious to, there we hear the rumors. We know that, gosh, if there was a run on the grocery store, or yeah, this came from South America and shouldn't it
Hmm.
have come from down the street? We don't
Right.
always think things through. So let's do a little bit of educating. We have a few minutes to do that. Help
Right.
our
I
viewers
still have two
understand why
hours,
it's
right?
important to grow food. I'm sorry?
Yeah. I still have 2 hours, right?
It would be great, wouldn't it? Maybe we'll just keep doing this. Why not?
There you
Our
go.
production
There you
manager
go.
is perfectly happy because he's got quite a garden himself. At
Oh,
some point,
nice.
I should have him share what he does. It's always a pleasure driving up to do these shows. But when we think about why it's important, we have so many people that are sticklers about keeping up their perfect line here in the South anyway of azaleas with their zoysia lawn and their well trimmed crepe myrtles, and
Hmm.
then there's rock or there's mulch down below, and there's nothing edible on the property. Is it pretty to look at? Yes. Is it aesthetically pleasing?
Hmm.
Sure. But if we were to need food and their current property doesn't have any of the systems in place to produce it, it's sometimes important to know why that could be an issue and
Yeah.
why we need to be more conscious. So can we talk a little bit about, just briefly, about the food supply in the United States
Absolutely.
and why every one of us should at least know how to grow something on our property?
Yeah. So here's the big thing. And I'm going to shift out of my urban farmer hat into my uh, unofficial Dr. Greg hat.
Okay.
I
Bring it
do not have
on.
a doctorate. I'll be clear about that. But I often talk about our health. And the single biggest reason that we need to be growing our own food is because it's healthier.
Mm-hmm.
I have confirmed this next piece of data that I'm going to share with you with multiple medical doctors and multiple nutritionists. And I know what I'm about ready to say is a bold, revolutionary statement. And I say it all the time. And I truly believe it. There are three things in our culture that cause 100% of the disease.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're growing your own food, you can address all three of them.
Okay.
Number one, lack of nutrition in our food. Our soils have been so overfarmed. There were studies after World War II that showed that the nutrients in our soils, our farm soils, were gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
Leached. Isn't the
50
term
years ago.
leached, Greg? Yeah.
Well, they used them all up. They're
Mm-hmm.
all used up. And they're not being added back into the soil. So
Right.
lack of nutrition in our foods, environmental toxins
Mm-hmm.
is number two, and stress.
Right.
So if you go out and start your own garden, you know what you're going to put in your garden
Mm-hmm.
because you're not going to put any bad chemicals in there because you're going to be eating that.
Mm-hmm.
You know that if you're creating healthy soil, the food's going to be more nutrient dense. And by gardening, you're reducing your stress level.
Yes. Just being in
So
nature and being in the soil, isn't that in and of itself a
exactly,
reciprocal thing? Mm-hmm.
exactly. And well, they've done studies that the bacteria in the soil, uh-oh, the bacteria in the soil is the same bacteria that's here
Right, in the gut.
in the
Mm-hmm.
gut. And so, in fact, they are now calling this area around us our holobiome.
Mm.
And, it's our inside gut, but it's also our outside, biome of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing things like showering in chlorinated water,
Yeah.
that's environmental toxins, and
Mm-hmm.
you're negatively impacting your health.
Mm-hmm.
When you're using chlorinated water to water your garden, you're negatively impacting the life in the soil.
Yeah.
So, one of the first things I tell people to do is stop using chlorinated water at your house. And you can put a whole house chlorination system on. We sell on our website, we sell small systems that you can put on a hose so you're not, chlorinating your garden. So, there's many things you can do, but that's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Stop using chlorine in your house and don't shower in chlorinated water. That's disastrous. So, bold statement, three things in our culture that cause 100% of the disease: lack of nutrition in our food,
Mm-hmm.
environmental toxins,
Mm-hmm.
and stress.
Yes. Oh,
Go
that's
garden.
beautiful. Go
Yeah.
garden.
Go garden,
Bumper
Dave. Go
sticker.
garden.
Permanent solution. Go
Yeah.
garden.
Yeah, exactly.
And I bet you do have something like unto that bumper sticker through Urban Farm and your many affiliates and obviously through your store. And I love it. I'm all for the slogan. It will save your life and it will improve the quality of your life, unquestionably.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Let me hit you with one more thing here.
you bet.
Okay, cool. So, one of the most important things for our gut health is that we're eating food in season. Food that's ripe when it comes off of our plants. And what I want to tell you is that when they're harvesting something in Peru
Mm-hmm.
or Australia and they're putting it on a plane and shipping it to us, it is not fully ripe.
Right. It's
It's
lacking
got
the enzymes, isn't it, Greg?
it's lacking the enzymes, and it's got it's got lectins in it. I read a book this past summer called The Plant Paradox, an absolutely amazing book, and it talks about what happens when a piece of fruit or piece of vegetable ripens,
Mm-hmm.
and the bad lectins or the anti-nutrients, they go away. So to your point, for our health, we want to eat in season also for our health. So that's, those are two of my biggest reasons: is grow your own food because you know what's going in it. You know it's going to be ripe when you pull it off the plant or the tree, and it's going to be healthier for you. And I'll tell you what, here's the thing. When I pick a peach here at the Urban Farm, this is how I have to eat it. I have to go here because what happens is when I eat the peach, the juices explode and they'll just
Yes.
go down the front of me. And when that happens, you will never buy a store-bought peach again. It
Isn't
won't
it the
happen.
truth? Isn't it
It
the
won't.
truth?
Yeah.
I'm a native to Southern California, and of course, that's the
Yep.
breadbasket of America when it comes to our
Yep.
produce. And I remember as part of social and youth project, we would have to go to the peach farm that was out near Pear Blossom, out towards the desert and past Valencia. But anyway, the long and the short of it is that was a treat. When we were
Oh,
told
yeah.
to go and pick the peaches on the peach farm to make sure that got passed along mostly to those that were in a charitable, need. That was how this was as a
Right.
church farm. We knew we were going to indulge in the juiciest, the freshest. Not only were we going to have a lot of, snowball fights a la peach, but we were going to go home absolutely, satiated in ways that
Peachified.
only a fresh peach that's warmed by the sun can taste like. And
Oh my God.
it's true. You get a tomato out of your garden, it tastes entirely different from whatever you got from even the nicest, organic section of a grocery store.
And a big piece of that is because it's ripe on the tree, it's more nutrient dense.
Right.
What you're tasting is the nutrients in it. So for your health, you have to grow your own food.
I love this. All right, so we have a few minutes left on the hour. I want all of our viewers to know how they can start to get more information about Urban Farm. They can follow your podcast, listen to some of the tremendous wisdom of the other homesteaders that have been doing these things that you have as guests. Let's give some props to what you're doing and what you're offering, Greg.
Perfect. Thank you. So first of all, the Urban Farm podcast is just a little over 2 years old. We just recorded our 325th episode.
Woo!
I'm so excited about that. We put 2 out a week right now. We're almost to 1 million listens. You can find out about our podcast and all of the hundreds of people that I've interviewed over the past 2 years at urbanfarmpodcast.com. By the way, you mentioned Joel Salatin a little earlier.
Yes.
He was on my podcast about 2 weeks ago, and Janice, my awesome, we call her Jarvis from the sci-fi stuff. She handles everything for me. She said, Greg, what title do I use for Joel Salatin? We need a title. I said, Janice, here's your title. Joel Salatin. Hey, it's Joel Salatin. What do you need a title for?
He had too many titles when we were writing up his bio for our show as well. Right. I think he gets high priest of, he gets to be called a high priest, I think, of many things, but yes.
Absolutely. That interview was the most brilliant interview I've ever done. So check that out, urbanfarmpodcast.com. If you go to urbanfarm.org, that's our website. You can sign up for our newsletter on the front page. There's free classes. We do free classes all the time. We had Elaine Ingham on about 2 weeks ago talking about soil health. That was amazing. So, we do all that education, both free and paid. So we have some courses that people can sign up for on aquaponics and growing your own food and backyard livestock and permaculture and those kinds of things. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is, we have to grow healthy soil. That is our single biggest thing that we need to do as an urban farmer, as an urban gardener. I know I'm repeating myself, but I have to because people have to get this. And if you go to healthysoilhacked.com, I'm gonna give your listeners some free videos and free content on how to grow healthy soil.
Awesome.
And it's really, really simple. You add organic matter. So there you have it.
When you went through the castings and you went through the chickens and a few other things that might seem a little bit less tangible to some of our suburbanites, I think that this is going to be a valuable resource for them to be able to take a look at it. Yeah. Say it one more time. Where are they going to get that information? Soil Hacked?
healthysoilhacked.com.
Okay. I am going to be looking at that too, because believe it or not, I thought all I got to do is create a compost pile and nature will do it itself. And then I realized, quite honestly, a little stewardship and intervention is required on my part to be able to keep filling up the beds in my organic raised bed garden. We were meant to be in symbiosis. We were meant to have a healthy and restorative relationship with the earth between, it should be obvious. Rudolf Steiner knew it. There is so much to the intuitive nature with which human beings and all sentient life are meant to work together. And you're just saying it in a way that's fun and common sense, Greg, and I think that the masses need it. And I am really so tremendously grateful and honored that you were able to join us tonight.
Oh, my God. It's been a blast. Here's what I tell people.
Okay.
It's really simple. I hold up whatever it is. Here we go. I hold it up, and it's like, we'll call this gardening or growing your own food. It's like, oh, my gosh, look at this. This is so much fun. This is the crazy scientist going on. This is so much fun, and you can do it too.
Right.
Really?
Right.
Anyways, there you have it.
It doesn't have to be difficult, and let's be honest, it does need to be fun, or we're not going to do it. Right? That's part of the stress release. Exactly. So it's been a thrill to have you, Greg. We're going to have to have you on and specialize. Yes. And I just want to say to our viewers, first of all, thank you, Greg. I don't want to miss the fact that you brought this wealth of knowledge to us, and it's been an honor to have you here. But to our viewers, there are answers. we really don't have to figure everything out for ourselves. There are those that have already trudged forward down these roads. They've taken the risks, they've put in the sweat equity, and they're here with a wealth of knowledge, even with free podcasts, to tell us how we can take some of these steps forward. There are solutions to good food, to regenerative systems, to living more sustainably and more empowered on your property, and feeling good about your contribution and having a minimized footprint, because we know there's enough toxins to go around. So I want to say to our viewers, take a look at this, watch it again on YouTube. We're now up on BitChute. Watch it again until you get the information that you need. And please support Solutionary TV, because we want to continue to bring you this amazing content. Thank you so much. And remember, together, we're the solution.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.